July 9, 2019 meeting of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission for the Town of Fairfield. Commissioner Corcoran is absent. In his place, Commissioner Gordon will be participating all evening. First item on the agenda is bills and communications of the meeting minutes, June 11, 2019.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Francis.
Second.
And second by Commissioner McAleese. Any comments or discussion on those?
None here. I saw nothing wrong.
Same. I think we're in good shape. Anybody else? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Minutes are adopted unanimously. Next is new applications to recommend to public hearing. First is 491 Turney Road, 880 South Benson Road. It's a coastal site plan and special permit application of the Town of Fairfield for marina channel dredging and beach renourishment in the A zone.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this proposal has a permit for DEP to do some dredging for the marina. Part of that requirement for that permit for the DEP is that the sand get redistributed on the beach. That is part of this application. It's going to exceed 250 cubic yards, so it needs a fill permit and a coastal site plan. Because it's a special permit for the fill, it does require public hearing.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Move to public hearing.
Okay, motion by Commissioner McAleese.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Noonan. Any further questions of staff? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Move to public hearing unanimously. Next is 1073 North Benson Road, special exception application of Fairfield University pertaining to the construction of a new convocation athletic facility to replace Alumni Hall in the AA zone.
Mr. Chairman, this is just, if you're familiar with the university, adjacent to the recreational complex, there's kind of a, call it an airplane hangar looking building, which is the old gym, Alumni Hall. They're looking to replace that with a bit of a larger facility that can hold student events and with the goal of bringing basketball back to campus.
Okay.
Special exception does require a public hearing.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question? Is that the one between Fairfield Prep and it's kind of, it's on that side, like the
Yes, if you
yeah.
if you're entering in the main North Benson driveway, you have the
left.
two prep buildings, and then the next building down is the recplex, if you
Okay.
will, and then the building between that and the student center is kind of a rounded roof-shaped
Yeah.
old gym that's called Alumni Hall. Looking to replace that with a facility that's larger, but that will enable them to bring basketball back to campus from Webster Bank Arena.
Terrific. I make a motion to move to public hearing.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner McAleese.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Noonan. Any other questions? Sounds like a highly desirable move.
Yeah.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, let's move to public hearing unanimously. Next is 479 Westway Road, request of Westway Road LLC to modify a stipulated judgment to allow for payment in lieu of providing 2 affordable units.
Yeah, some of you may recall back in April of 2016, to settle litigation about the request for an extension of a special permit application for a 16-unit condominium, there was a provision to put 2 units in to qualify, or I'm sorry, to comply with the inclusionary provision of the regulations that had been adopted subsequent to the original approval of the application. We talked about this kind of peripherally when we had the discussion with Mr. Barnhart about a potential draft for a regulatory amendment. But aside from that regulation, we have a request from the applicant to consider modifying that judgment. In their request, they have requested an opportunity to have a dialogue with the commission, and the way to do that is to schedule for public hearing so they can make their pitch. You can have a dialogue with them about that and go forward from there. So we recommend scheduling this for a public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
The
Question,
the
Commissioner Francis.
requirement was a pretty substantial percentage, wasn't it? 320% or something?
There was yes, this group had met with the Affordable Housing Committee in an effort to try to arrive at a number that made sense in using that conversation as a base. That was the model for the draft proposal that was kind of floated. We don't have a formal application yet, but yes, it was, I want to say, I forget the number, but it's 300% or 400% of the area median. It works out to about $300,000 per unit.
Yeah.
Per unit, which would be deposited into our Affordable Housing Trust Fund?
That's their proposal, is to make a payment into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But
Right.
again, they'll have an opportunity to flesh that out. You'll have an opportunity to engage them in a dialogue and questions about,
Right.
the validity of such a proposal.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that, the only requirement that we had was to comply with the changes in the
Yep.
regulations. The only change was this affordable housing requirement, and now...
It is, and as we talked about in that other context, what became pretty clear, at least in this case, in a for sale unit type of scenario, the disparity, at least in this case, in the price points is very dramatic. Not as, so again, I don't want to speak for the applicant.
Yep.
They'll make their pitch. I think it warrants a discussion.
Yeah, and I think that is the point, right? There are questions, there is a background here, and that's why we should move this to public hearing. So can I have a motion? Commissioner Meyer, so moved.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Levy. Anyone else have any questions before we vote? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay. It's moved to public hearing unanimously. Thank you. Next is old business 2425 Morehouse Highway Special Exception Application of the Town of Fairfield pertaining to the construction of a new clubhouse and cart barn facility in H. Smith Richardson Golf Course in a AAA zone.
Okay, this matter was heard at our last meeting on June the 11th. The town is seeking a special exception application to build a new golf course clubhouse facility in place of the existing clubhouse at H. Smith Richardson Golf Course. In addition to the existing cart barn is also proposed. The existing clubhouse is 6,909 square feet in size, and the new proposed clubhouse is 9,608 square feet, an increase of 2,699 feet. The cart barn is to be increased from 2,400 square feet to 4,700 square feet. There are presently 161 paved parking spaces at the site. The new plan proposes 151 paved spaces with an additional 45 overflow spaces to be provided utilizing reinforced turf for a maximum parking capacity of 196 spaces, again, up from the current 161. The relevant standard considerations for a special exception application hopefully are familiar to you. Number one is the location, type, character, and size and use of the building in harmony with and in conform to the appropriate and orderly development of the town and neighborhood, and not hinder or discourage the use of adjacent property or impair its value. Is the nature and location of the use of the buildings and structures such that there is adequate access for fire protection? Are the streets serving the proposed use adequate to carry prospective traffic with provision made for entering and leaving the property without creating undue traffic hazard or congestion? And has there been adequate provision made for off-street parking? And lastly, is the proposed use in compliance with the plan of conservation and development? You have before you a revision to the site plan, a little bit unusual in that as you heard at the hearing, the town, as part of the budget approval process for this project, kind of took ownership of the parking lot construction as part of the town side project, and as a result of that, there was some discussion about putting a solar array in, which was kind of late in the game news to the building committee. After the hearing, the town has decided to revise that plan a bit, so you have before you a town submitted plan that takes the solar array out of the center of the parking lot and decreasing it in size and moving it to the last southerly bay. There was some concern with the building committee that, you know, the design of this building is such that they didn't want the view of it to be obscured as you enter the site. So they've also, as a result of that, been able to add a couple of trees in the middle of the parking lot, which was part of the discussion at the public hearing as to whether or not the shade tree requirement had been met. And this revised plan, in my opinion, satisfies that requirement. There was also testimony from a neighbor on Hoyden's Lane requesting several things. One, a modification to the existing sign that exists at the intersection of Morehouse Highway and Hoyden's Lane. Two, there's a chain link gate adjacent to the 9th tee at Hoyden's Lane. They were requesting that be replaced. When the softball field down the street was done, in the driving range that exists further down the street, there was a smaller gate there. They're requesting a similar treatment, so it's a less visible, bulky chain link fence. And lastly, there was a request for more screening at the maintenance facility that's way up on Hoyden's Lane. These are kind of ongoing maintenance issues that are not necessarily related to this project, but I did reach out to Anthony Calabrese, who was the Director of Parks and Recreation and a former member of this commission, with those items, and he assured me that through an email that over the span of the project time frame that they would be able to accomplish those 3 items that were requested. As a matter of fact, the golf superintendent also got back to me and indicated while it wasn't spelled out at the public hearing, they do plan on relocating some of the existing landscaping that's around the parking lot presently that needs to be removed as part of this project. They plan in the fall to relocate some of those shrubs and other things that they can up to Hoyden's Lane to address some of these issues. So, so while not necessarily related to the construction at hand, the town director of public works who manages this overall facility has no issue with trying to comply with those 3 items that were raised at the hearing by that adjacent neighbor. That's all I have at this point, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So, why don't we get a motion on the table so we can talk about this?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Noonan.
Second.
Second by Commissioner McAleese. You want to start,
yeah.
Commissioner Noonan?
Sure. I thought it was a good
Yeah. Thanks.
I thought it was a good application. We were going on a roll last time. I think we got hung up a little bit on the parking lot and with respect to the number of spots with the shading tree, with the solar panels and such. I think this new revised plan satisfies most of my concerns that I initially had. Maybe now knowing more definitively where, if at all, the solar panels are going to be, where they are, the additional shade trees, which staff has said is now in compliance. I think we're losing a few paved spots, but overall
Correct.
we're gaining with the overflow, which the 40 or so would be grass lots, essentially, or grass spaces. Is that correct?
Correct. There's 35 spaces, if you include the overflow parking, 35 more space capacity than there is presently, 10 fewer permanently paved spaces.
Yeah. A little unusual in the sense that it's going to be non-paved spaces, but having been up there a few times and seeing how it's normally used, the representations and how it's used, and the fact that they will have those overflow spots, at least to me, satisfies the concerns that I had with parking. I mean, overall, I thought in going through the list of the findings we need to make, the golf course has been there for ages, and the additions will certainly be in harmony with the neighborhood. I saw no issues as to fire protection. Again, traffic being up there for so long, I don't see any traffic issues. It doesn't seem like they were going to be expanding 9 holes or 18 holes. So again, the same kind of ideas, same kind of usage, maybe with a little additional restaurant use, which I think should be, as they said, something complementary to golf, but maybe not at the same time as far as usage. And I would think that it's compliant with our master plan. For those reasons, I would support approving this project.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner McAleese, any other comments?
I agree with everything Commissioner Noonan just laid out. I do have a minor question. Is all of the overflow parking just along the drive? I forget what we'd covered last time.
Yeah, there's two, it's easier to see on the larger plan that you
Yeah.
originally had, if you have it. I can, there are two areas, mainly along the entry drive. The larger of the two is, if you're familiar with the golf course, would be adjacent to the 9th hole, and the smaller of the two would be on the left-hand side of the driveway coming in. They're hatched areas. They're shown in that, I think they're shown on that revised.
Yeah, it's on the
plan.
match B part. So
Yeah, it's
said-
kind of a crosshatch.
So it's double loaded at the very beginning, and then it just goes to the right side as you go deeper into the site.
Correct.
Yeah, and there's nowhere else. Just wanted to be sure. I don't see anywhere else they could do it really, with the surrounding holes and.
They show, if you turn to the, I think it's the second page, L2A on that revised sheet, you can kind of see the little blow up. As you come in the driveway, there's kind of an octagon shading, or hexagons, I should say, on either side of the driveway
Sure.
coming in. Those are the areas that will be reinforced turf.
Oh, is that the number spot there too? It says 10 on one side. Is that what that's telling us?
Yes, you can
Okay,
see there's
so 10,
23 on the
23.
right, 10 on the left, and then as you pass those three trees,
There's another 12.
you'll see it on L2A, the
Yeah.
preceding sheet, there's another 12.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Then I have no issue. I think, as Tom said, it was nicely presented, it's pretty clear. We clarified further the whole solar panel issue, and I think that's a smarter move, moving it where they moved it, so I'm in favor.
Excellent. Anyone else? Well, I agree. I thought you did a great job summarizing that and articulating all that, Commissioner Noonan.
Thank you.
and Commissioner McAleese. There was a question about the fire department at the public hearing and signing off on this. Is the fire department reviewed the plans and signed off on?
They have.
They have. Okay, excellent. Any comments down there? Good. Very good. Okay. And thank you very much for reaching out to Mr. Calabrese and Parks and taking care of those items. I'm satisfied that with that representation, that it really is the issues are real. I mean, I know we've been there, and but outside the scope of this building committee and this process. But it's good to be able to help where we can. So, okay. Ready to vote?
Yep.
Motion is to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The application is approved unanimously. Thank you.
You don't want to.
Okay. Next is zoning compliance, matters 2117 Fairfield Beach Road, coastal site plan application of Gustavo Cardozo pertaining to the construction of a single-family dwelling in the Beach District.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I've shared within the course of the last few days, half a dozen or so or more emails of interest from nearby neighbors expressing some concerns about this project and specifically requesting an opportunity to be heard. I have discussed that with the applicant in recommending that in light of the interest, would recommend that you hold this over to a public hearing so the folks that have expressed some concern have the opportunity to do so and be addressed by the applicant.
Right. Thank you. And just to be clear, under our rules, we have discretion as to whether to
Yep.
conduct a public hearing with respect to coastal site plan applications. And we have done that on occasion, in the past.
It's a uniquely located piece of property on the beach, and I think it warrants the discussion that the neighbors are requesting.
Move to a public hearing?
Okay, motion to have a public hearing by Commissioner Noonan and
Second.
second by Commissioner McAleese. Any other questions or comments from anyone? No? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, let's move to public hearing unanimously. Next item is our public hearing. 5151 Park Avenue, special exception application of Sacred Heart University pertaining to a 6-court tennis facility in the R3 zone. you need a moment? Oh, look at that. MacGyver.
Hopefully that works.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, for the record, my name is Bill Fitzpatrick. I'm an attorney in Fairfield with the law firm of Fitzpatrick, Ray and Bologna. We have offices at 1735 Post Road. I'm here tonight representing Sacred Heart University, which, as you well know, is located at the intersection of Park Avenue and Jefferson Street. Sacred Heart has purchased the property of the Jewish Home for the Elderly of Fairfield County at 175 Jefferson Street. The combined property totals approximately 80 acres and is located in the R3 zoning district. The university is a permitted use, excuse me, in the R3 zone via special exception approval. The special exception application before the commission tonight relates to the construction of 6 tennis courts. Proposed tennis courts are to be located in the westerly portion of the university campus, north of the new end zone building, south of the 4 existing Jefferson Street residence halls. The tennis facility consists of 6 tennis courts with customary tennis court appurtenances, a tennis backboard, tennis net posts, umpire chairs, scoreboard, light fixtures, court enclosure fencing, benches with canopies, etc. The new tennis courts were originally planned for the north side of the upper campus quad, but have been relocated to the proposed location. This enables the new upper campus quad to be dedicated to student residence halls, including the dining hall located in Building C. The revised tennis court location keeps the tennis courts on campus with ready access for students, and is also convenient to both the new end zone building and the existing pit center facility. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Ms. Amy Samuelson, professional architect with the SLAM Collaborative of Glastonbury, to outline the specifics of the tennis court proposal. Amy.
You want to sit at the table to use the thing, or I'll move the microphone?
I
That's
can just
easier.
move the microphone down and
Yeah,
stand here.
yeah. I'll just take it out of the stand, and then you can go with it. You can go mobile.
Great. Thanks to Bill for the nice introduction and explanation of the project. I have with me a short presentation to supplement the documents that you already have reviewed. This is a diagram of the existing campus conditions from 2015. We chose to show this version of the Google Earth map because it shows the previous location of 6 tennis courts on campus and the proximity of that previous location to the new proposed site. So you'll see that the new end zone building has been built in this location. This area has become a plaza and JP's Diner, and so we're proposing that the new location of the tennis courts be just west and north of their previous location. Reorienting the site plan. Now you'll see that in this case, west is on the top of the page. This is the configuration of the proposed tennis courts. The grade slopes greatly from the football complex on the south side down toward the residence halls. And so there are a series of retaining walls that assist in situating these tennis courts in this location. The slope also gently slopes toward the golf course at the north side and this wooded area. So there's a difference in height between these upper 3 courts down to the lower 3 courts with a ramp proposed right here for accessibility. and there's about 3.5 feet difference between the two levels of courts. This is a view of the existing conditions. This is actually a rendering from a year or so ago when the rec center was under construction, and now it looks just about like this. And here's the proposed tennis courts situated, as you see here, north of the end zone building, with a retaining wall as needed to help get down the slope. So there's retaining walls on both sides. This is a view from the other direction of those courts. It better shows the difference between the lower courts and the upper courts. And it also shows you some of the amenities that are proposed to go along with this construction. Sorry, can't walk.
At this point, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Amy. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. Thomas Daly, a professional engineer with Malone and McBroom with offices in Cheshire, to discuss the drainage plan, which is relevant to the plan you see before you now. Tom.
Thank you, Bill. As noted, Tom Daly with Milo and McBroom. I'm a professional engineer, and we've been working with Sacred Heart University and the town of Fairfield on all the projects here. So we've been doing some detailed hydraulic analysis. And from a drainage standpoint, what you can see is the tennis courts, and then to the north, there's a little strip of land located there. So we've taken all the drainage from the tennis courts and drained it into that strip of land between the tennis court and a retaining wall. So no tennis court drainage is actually flowing to the golf course because it doesn't go there today. So we took all our drainage, and located in between the tennis courts and the retaining wall is an underground concrete chamber system where the water is metered out. As you can see, the pipe that goes off to the right goes down to where the dorms are. It connects into an existing drainage system. And then just off to the right of this plan is a very large detention basin that the water ultimately then goes into that. We didn't take credit for that detention basin because it was already online. We basically modeled our drainage so it's right at our basically end of construction. But that does allow the commission to understand that we are providing a series of stormwater management systems as it goes down through the project. As I said, no water is being drained, no tennis court water is being drained onto the golf course. We're capturing all that. We did work through with your engineering department to the point where they've signed off on the drainage design of that. And then I also believe we received wetlands administrative approval where they also looked at our drainage analysis. But we are showing basically at the end of the tennis court that we're showing no increase in runoff from the 0 to the 100-year storm right at. And we've kind of looked at a lot of these projects, the diner, the end zone, and now tennis court, as somewhat distinct little projects as opposed to, it's probably maybe a little bit overkill, but it provides some level of protection where we look at these as little distinct projects and manage our stormwater right at the project's edge. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, at this point, I usually sum up and conclude the presentation, making specific reference to Section 27 of the zoning regulations. Tonight, I think it's overkill to analyze the regs on an item-by-item basis, the town plan of conservation and development, etc. There's no new building proposed. There's no new campus use being established. The 6 tennis courts, as Ms. Samuelson showed you, was originally located where the present end zone building parking lot is located, were originally planned to be reconstructed, as I noted earlier. And the northerly section of the former Jewish home property have finally found a home in the proposed location, again north of the end zone building and south of the Jefferson Street dorms. Tennis courts are likely not visible from any off-campus location. They're an appropriate seasonal student use. On a side note, one question that arose in a prior Sacred Heart application was the number of units of student housing that would end up on the main campus. For informational purposes, that figure is 2,260 beds. The upper quad will have 939 beds. The 5151 Park property will have 1,321 beds. Again, total of 2,260. This application was the subject of an inland wetland application approved by the Conservation Commission with conditions. I submitted a copy of that approval with the application. For the reasons the commission have heard, I think this application is worthy of the commission's approval. Amy Samuelson, Tom Daly, and I, as well as Carmelo Cicero from the university, will be pleased to answer any questions the commission may have.
Thank you very much. Could you just go back and repeat the information that you just gave us about the
beds?
number of beds? Yeah, that was we appreciate you getting back to us on that. It was a question that came up, but prior.
I do want to note, the reason I couldn't get to that information was that public hearing was closed. And it was a technical defect for me to submit something after the hearing is closed, even on an issue that was raised during the public hearing. It's the reason I didn't reply earlier. The figure is Upper Quad, which is the former Jewish home property, 939 beds. The 5151 Park property, which, as you know, wraps around the Jewish home property, which would be the dorm on the corner of Park and Jefferson, and then the two high-rise dorms to the rear, adjacent to the golf course. Just three, Carmelo? Three dorms on 5151? Yeah. Oh, and Tucson's part of the Jewish home. And that total is 1321 for 5151 Park, for a total of 2260.
What
Okay.
about
Thank you.
the housing adjacent to the tennis court? Is that in that 5150?
You're right, thank you. That's Jewish home, the Jefferson Street dorms are in the 5151 Park. I knew there were more.
1321.
Yeah, they're in the 1321. They're the first ones we got done,
Great. Thank you very much for that.
certainly.
Does anyone have any questions? Commissioner Meyer.
Does this number include the high-rise on Park Avenue that's on the other side
It does
of
not.
campus?
That's in the city of Bridgeport.
That's in the city of
Roncalli.
Bridgeport? Do you know the number of beds in that building?
10 stories.
Okay.
City of Bridgeport well remembers
Okay.
that. So do I.
Curious.
I don't know the figure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions? No? All right.
Approximately 300.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. All right. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any member of the public wish to be heard on this application? Going once, going twice. No? All right, close the public hearing. Thank you. So next item is our planning discussion, POCD presentation and discussion on infrastructure. Why don't we just take 2 minutes, okay?
Perfect.
And we can reorient and take a bathroom break. Thank you very much.
Hello? Okay. Thanks so much. So in order to kind of keep the momentum for our plan of conservation and development discussions going, what we thought we should do is kind of lay the groundwork in terms of talking about a section of the POCD that really didn't have as much statutory requirement when the plan was done in 2000. There have been a lot of sections that have been added that we have to address in this upcoming plan that have to do with kind of looking at multimodal transportation. I would say that our updates that were completed in 2015, 2016 with the bike ped planning work that was done helps address some of those concerns within the statute, but I think some of the other ones as related to physical infrastructure, plans for public utilities, as well as our existing sewer system areas and where plant expansion is intended to occur, as is related to our proposed increase in development, that really was not as addressed within the current plan. So that's the conversation that we're going to initiate this evening, is kind of talking about some of those items. In the existing plans and goals, there were some things related to kind of watershed concerns that are interrelated to some of the stormwater discussion that we need to have moving forward, certainly in response to, I think, some of the heavy rain events that we've had that have kind of brought that awareness to the surface. And there's also some new statutory requirements with the MS4 requirements, which our engineering, Bill Hurley from our engineering staff will describe a little bit later. Of course, a big part of the POCD is transportation, and kind of what are some of the trends that are kind of moving forward. I know that we touched on a bit of this in our TOD discussion in terms of parking ratios and what may be more appropriate moving forward as we look into the future for our land use patterns, and also transportation behavior and how that may change. In the existing plan goals and policies, again, mirroring some of the amendments that were made in 2015, we did incorporate the bike ped planning work that was done. We also, of course, Metro Center was opened, which also, I think, established some of the goals that were identified. And let's see. And then some of the other concerns were about circulation patterns related to historic districts, which I think is on the next slide. But other than that, I think we're going to just kind of talk about the baseline as to where we are today. And realistically for Fairfield, we expect our population to be pretty stable moving forward. We will have some limited housing unit increases, especially with the introduction of more multifamily. But realistically, I don't think that we're going to have significant demands on present systems based on both of those items. And our growth is really kind of reflective of Connecticut's rather limited growth overall, generally speaking. So of course we have some of our town staff superstars here. We have Joe Michelangelo, who's our Director of Public Works, who'll be providing part of the presentation, as well as Bill Hurley, who's our Engineering Manager in the Engineering Department. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill now, and he's going to do the first part, transition to Joe, transition back to Bill.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Let's see here as we go. Yeah, just going over the transportation infrastructure. We have obviously the major highways. You have the Merritt Parkway, and you have Connecticut Turnpike, I-95. We got the 3 railroad stations in Southport, the Fairfield Center and the Metro Center, Route 1 Post Road, and the north-south routes 135, 136, 58, and 59 over there. So some good news that you may not be aware of, thanks to the with neighborhood groups and the Fairfield Bike and Ped Committee, worked with several town agencies and the Board of Selectmen, and we created a complete street policy that ranked number 7 in the country. So we're very proud of that. As you know, Complete Streets addresses the needs of all users, handicapped, transit riders, pedestrians, and drivers as well, and bicyclists or cyclists. The sidewalk infrastructure, it's pretty, we have a, I don't know, you can't really read it, didn't quite come out, but we do have an inventory map of where our sidewalks are located, mostly in the downtown area. There's some in the beach district, some in Southport, and obviously scattered around with all the schools. So we keep an inventory of where repairs are needed and requests by various neighborhood groups, DPW, Board of Ed, engineering, and we actually create a matrix and try to generate a priority list, obviously depending on budgets and requests from the public. The proposed bike network, again, Fairfield Bike and Ped and the MetroCog were able to create a master plan here where they identified desired routes. This was also done by public participation. I believe there was a petition of about 800 people, up to even 1,000 that participated, where they thought bicycle routes were needed or desired. And again, some of the highlighted ones I'll just highlight over here is the the East Coast Greenway. We have the Mill Plain Road bike path, which was one of our first. We have some others that go along Unclewood Road. Just recently, they did the beach loop, and then they had something called the library to library. And this year, and a lot of these were obtained funding through State Department of Health grants, and our health department was essential in helping us get the funding for that. And this year's proposal is going to be a little bit on Brookside Drive, St. Mortar, through Old Black Rock Turnpike and Tamor to get to Lake Mohegan. I think they're going to nickname it the Beach to Beach bike route. And so that one should be implemented this summer or very early fall. Just recently completed was the Black Rock Turnpike study. Some of you may have attended one of the 3 or 4 public meetings that the town hosted. We had Fitzgerald Holiday and Ty and Bond were the consultants on that. But it was a true team effort, as we had members of town planning and zoning, housing and economic development, engineering, and the police department all involved, and probably even some other town agencies I'm forgetting. But it was a study mainly concentrated from the St. Mortar intersection, which is about here, and it goes all the way along Black Rock Turnpike off the page there to the Tunxus Hill Black Rock Turnpike split by Chip's restaurant there. And they had many proposals and phases. The project is so big, though, that we'll probably have to do it in phases. And there was a proposal to do a roundabout by the Black Rock Turnpike and Tunxus Hill split. There's another one here that's, again, these are just proposed. These are not detailed plans by any stretch, by Old Navy. And we talked to the business owners who owned a lot of the property, and they were on board with the study. We had very well attendance for that. Some of the meetings attracted over 100 people, others were 50 and 70. We had a community involvement group, we had a technical advisory group, and what this study will do is it could give zoning a tool. If there's, say, new development coming in, then you can always refer to the study and what some of the recommendations are. And then obviously, as mentioned before, we had assistance with MetroCog. And even as we speak right now, the town has submitted a lot SIP application, mainly for this area between Fairfield Woods and Stilson Road, maybe as phase 1. We're applying for over $2 million in improvements for that. So, sure.
Thanks. So a lot of the other aspects that we just talked about are things which I understand how they get implemented, right? Through private development, or even the town comes in with an application for the bike ped thing and whatever. This is a state road, right? And so there has to be some collaboration with the state to make these improvements. Does there not? Or funding? Does the state come in and offset expenses? How does this get implemented over time?
That's a good question, and I should mention that during the study and the whole process of the study, our consultants and several town officials and Jim Wendt, myself, and Mark Barnhart did attend some of those state meetings, and the DOT has at least given them certainly what we'd call conceptual approval. As I said, when we get the detailed plans, they'll review them further, but overall the state was receptive to these concepts. And now as far as funding, typically the state may participate in some things, but in other times they don't. Basically, if it's their idea, they sometimes participate. But a lot of times the state will say they maintain curb to curb. And so if there's sidewalk improvements or bus shelters, that kind of thing, that's usually the responsibility of the municipality. We have in the past done with cooperation with the DOT. I'll give you an example of on some of our crosswalks where if the town implemented the ADA ramps, the state would come by and revise or upgrade, say, the pedestrian signals, because they have a DOT electrical unit. Meanwhile, the DPW, we have the machinery and the equipment to do the ramps. And so, in some cases, we have worked together, and each, the municipality and the state, do their thing, and it works out pretty well. Right. That's how the ones by the railroad station got constructed as well.
Gotcha. And so I mean, literally rubber meeting the road, the actual construction is done by our DPW, and it's not by the state.
Well, for a project this big, we would put it out to contract bid and hire a contractor.
Okay.
Although the state might not outright participate in the funding, maybe they do, but they usually do provide or administrate the grants, so that's kind of their participation. Okay. Some of the grants, LOTSIP and the connectivity grants that we'll talk about later, those are state grants, and then sometimes there's federal grants. And so it really depends on what type of grant is being applied for.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the overall funding for something like, for example, there are a couple of roundabouts proposed in there. Those would be a project that, as Bill would mention, would get on a regional list through the regional planning agency, where transportation projects are kind of prioritized by the chief elected officials of the participating towns to kind of get a ranking of where those go, and then ultimately get into a state funding queue or eligible for other grant funding. So the big pieces of that, like the roundabout, would typically be a state or federally funded thing that would get outside contracted and bid out and so forth. But there are other elements of that plan. There's an appendix which is going to be important for us to refer to in our piece for access management, for example, which makes some specific recommendations on which curb cuts make sense to consolidate or eliminate along. Right. And those are decisions that DOT have to say yes or no on, but there's really of no cost to the state to, if a property is going to be redeveloped and we're going to say, hey, our plan recommends you eliminate 2 out of 3 of your curb cuts, and that can then be part of the implementation on the private side to kind of, as private development happens, take advantage of the plan to implement some of those things that would interface between the public and the private property. But some of the bigger pieces of this, like a roundabout, is going to be a project that has to get approved on the regional and state level, and then get in a funding queue.
Right. So the way that we would incorporate this into the POCD would be to make a recommendation that we and the town participate in the MetroCog, get in the queue, apply for the state grants, and actually, seek realization of the recommendations that are made, in
Exactly, and the more the
things.
tie-in to our POCD, to other plans, kind of gives it that priority in grant funding. There's always kind of tie-ins to, hey, to what local plans are there that make such a recommendation. And
right.
so we'll kind of cross-reference these, but in terms of the access management stuff, we might, take specific elements out of that document and actually fold it into our plan. So it's going to be a little of both.
Right, because I imagine, and I mean I know from experience, right? You're at the MetroCog and you need to rely on a certain a document, some authority for your proposition, right? The town of Fairfield seeks to implement, this plan, which was part of this study, and we've actually adopted that as part of our POCD, and that's something that we can rely on.
And again, the highlight too is that the study had proven that the rate of accidents here were like 2 or 3 times the average for, say, a 4-lane segment of, say, mile long or something like that. So
Right.
it was a high accident area, and obviously anybody here who's tried to cross Black Rock Turnpike, 4, in some cases 5 lanes, it is very difficult for those with limited mobility. So.
Okay.
We're looking for the safety aspects. And then going back to what Jim had said too, yeah, the MetroCog has, I think, what they call a transportation improvements program, or a TIP, or TIP for projects. And I think the town had submitted at least 20 concepts with very, minor, detail. But what that enables us to do is when the grants come available, if you're not on the TIP, you can't apply for the grants. So anything that we're even thinking of, we try to put on there. So thank you on that. Okay, and speaking of another one that we're working with, the MetroCog, this one here, I believe the design, it should be just about ready to start this summer, the Post Road Circle. This is one that's going to be a little bit similar to the Black Rock Turnpike, but under obviously a different area and a different situation. The Post Road Circle study is going to concentrate obviously at the Post Road Circle, but it does go all the way up to Shoreham Village Drive in the one direction, and to North Benson in the other. And again, if you don't know, that's Shoreham Village Drive right in there, and then North Benson's just a little bit off our map there. And again, looking for accident reduction, safety improvements, pedestrian improvements, and transit improvements. And we had performed a road safety audit, and the 15 or so committee members who, some of them were town officials, some of them were from Board of Ed, some of them were from the town departments, police, and even a couple of volunteers. We saw somebody about 75 years old or so trying to cross the 4 lanes here to get to the bus stop, and we really didn't know if they were going to make it. They were really huffing and puffing trying to cross over. And so those are the things that we hope to aim to improve on with these types of studies. And again, same thing. When you get the study done, you have the support, you have the public meetings. If the public meetings are well attended, people from MetroCog and the state notice, and they usually get put up to the front of the list. As you know, most grants are competitive. Same thing here in Southport. We did a road safety audit with the police department, members of UConn, the state DOT. We had some business representatives, some town officials, RTM members from Southport, DPW, TPZ, and Economic Development were there. This is an area in Southport that hasn't really changed much in terms of the roadway configuration, basically done around the age of the turnpike in the late 50s. But as new businesses have come in, it's created a lot of new interest, and I'll give the local plugs here, Organica and Garlic and Herb, Garlic and Herb. And so this area has gotten a lot more pedestrian use, and there's a couple of other businesses in the area as well.
And there's a bus stop right there.
And there's a bus stop there that needs help, yeah. Matter of fact, it's right over there. And we were fortunate enough to get the grant. It's a $360,000 grant, and we are negotiating with the consultant, and they should start later this summer on this project. So we're going to move forward with this as well. And a perfect example is right here. When you cross from here to the other side, there's no pedestrian indicator. You don't even know if it's a red or a green light. It's all overgrown over here. We intend to do a new bus stop there, or a transit stop, And we just recently, DPW did a sidewalk on Hulls Highway as well. And so, you know, again, like you were talking about before, DPW on some of the smaller stuff can do. When we get to the larger stuff, we hire a contractor, we try to get grant money, and on this one we were able to do so. And same thing here with Stratfield Village, state representatives and delegation. We're able to obtain a grant for Stratfield Village. It's over $600,000, I think it's $650,000. And again, it will concentrate mainly in what we call the Four Corners area. That will be the core. We'll try to do a streetscape scenario, but in the same token, we're again trying to have the handicap accessible ramps, some beautification, maybe some public gathering areas if it's possible, and some improvements of sidewalks that some of which have are probably 40 and 50 years old, and some are in fairly good shape, but there's some that do, you know, they're almost time for it to be replaced. So it's perfect timing on this proposal as well. And here's one of our, I think, success stories. It's all about 99% complete. The Kings Highway Pedestrian Improvement Project that went from, it started at Chambers Street and Kings Highway, and originally was only going to go to Brentwood, but again, public participation, the enthusiasm of the town, the regional planning agency, we were able to get additional money and go to Villa Avenue. So we hope to eventually go from Villa Avenue to the Bridgeport line, say in the next couple of years, and that was another one that we submitted for. But this one here, in some of the cases, the sidewalks are 6 to 8 foot wide, and right over here we did a recent pocket park with a little rain garden over here and on the other side as well. And you're already starting to see, you know, some of the owners now kind of taking some pride with some new plantings. And we have noticed a little bit increase in pedestrian traffic, you know, already. I mean, you go by there any time now and you see anywhere, you know, from probably about half a dozen people walking. And, you know, they could be going to transit stops, they could be going to the train station, or maybe they're walking to businesses. And obviously with the mostly nice weather we've had this week and last week, you're starting to see some of the pedestrian activity pick up. So, and one of the targets that we have is a Grassmere post. We submitted an application, a grant application on that. MetroCog approved it, and so did the board there. Right now it's under DOT review. Hopefully we'll be getting the word that we get this grant. It's up to $2 million, and it would cover pretty much the area where the Post Road study ended. So it would go from Shoreham Village Drive to probably the bridge there on Post Road, but we also go along Grassmere Avenue as well. The right-of-way is kind of limited there, but you can see over here by the condition of some of the sidewalks and driveway aprons that they can use some freshening up. So. And our capital improvement projects, as I said, we mentioned them all before, pretty much Southport, Black Rock Turnpike, and Grassmere. The state projects, the state on the paving list, we know they're on Route 1 in Norwalk, making their way over to Westport, so we figure in a couple of years they'll be heading over in the probably Southport area, maybe Fairfield as well, Fairfield Center. We're always trying to work with the state DOT for any projects. Whenever they do a pre-construction meeting or even a design meeting, somebody from the town usually attends and provides town input into the project. Our bridges, we have the finance department requires us to do what they call a waterfall chart. So it's like a 5-year plan. So Joe and I have rated the bridges based on the reports, and we basically have finished the Valley Road Bridge right now in design, our Duck Farm and Commerce Drive. We just met with the consultant today. They're starting. They were given a notice to proceed today. Congress Street Bridge repair. That one we're going to do in-house with the design, and that's almost wrapped up, and then we'll put it out to bid. And then the Bronson Box Culvert is another one that we're trying to obtain some grant money for. Oh, sure.
I have
Go
a
ahead.
question. In terms of paving, you mentioned paving. A number of people have asked me about paving. These are major thoroughfares, right? You know, Post Road and et cetera. There's been a lot of work around town on residential streets, replacing the gas lines and the water lines, where you know, there's been a lot of upheaval, right? And as they go through, you know, they dig up the trenches and then they lay down temporary asphalt. Is there a plan to repave all of those roads that are now being torn up by this you know, utility work that's going on?
Okay.
And I don't know. Number of people have asked me. And
So the number of roads in the beach area that were done around Reef Road and the roads to the west, we collaborated with Southern Connecticut Gas on that project, where instead of doing a trench, they contributed money. We spent some of our own money. So we're able to overlay those roads curb to curb in that section there.
Okay.
They're doing the other side of the beach area now, basically east of Penfield.
Yep.
And what they're doing there is replacing low pressure gas with high pressure gas, which is current state of the art. So those roads will most likely get the same treatment. One of the things we require the gas company or any of the utilities to do is restore our roads as equal or better, but that doesn't mean they have to go curb to curb. So oftentimes there's a cutback. At the minimum, we try to get one lane out of them. But I think by and large, once the roads are completed, the temporary patch, permanent patch, we live up to it that they're as good or better than when the roads started getting excavated.
Right. I mean, okay. So, do we know which streets are going to, and is there a way to find out which streets are going to get a repave and which streets are going to be patched? Because, and I mean, just from my own personal experience, the patch is not as good or better. I mean, it just isn't.
Okay. Well, if you have a road that has 15-year-old asphalt and you cut out a 10-foot lane and you put brand new asphalt there, yeah, the brand new asphalt is going to be better than the 15-year-old asphalt.
Yeah.
One of the problems you have with
It settles, and then you get a divot.
and one of the issues you have with gas, so there are areas that are newly served by natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
So like up in Stratfield, Churchill area, all the side streets off of there, is the first time everybody got gas there. So ideally, everybody would connect at one fell swoop. We pave the road, and then it's done. But if people have a fully functioning oil furnace, they're probably not going to convert right away. In 5 years, in 7 years, when it's time to replace your hot water heater, your kitchen range, you say that's when you make your decision. So one of the things we don't want to do is pave it and then get, 5 utility cuts every single year on a street. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah, I understand. But if you're talking about a 15-year-old road, and you're suggesting that we're going to fill the the cut with fresh new asphalt, it's a 15-year-old road. I would imagine that we repave our roads more frequently than once every 15 years.
Correct. So what we'd like to do is use conventional asphalt and then use a series of different treatments, micro seals and chip seals, just to extend the life, because the asphalt that looks like the Sacred Heart tennis court's the most expensive thing you can do. So we couldn't afford to overlay every road in a 15-year cycle. We'd be spending much more than we do right now.
Yeah. All right. The other thing that has occurred to me in the past, and I think I've raised it with you, Joe, is as we're redoing all of this infrastructure, gas, water, et cetera, is there any way that we can advocate for the burying of the electrical lines as well? I mean, one of the issues we've got year in, year out is, with trees and down wires and transformers and everything. And I don't see much effort. I see effort in upgrading gas and water and all that stuff. I don't see much effort around trying to bury electrical.
And yes, converting a New England town like Fairfield from overhead to underground would be most expensive project you could ever imagine. It's more than tearing down all your schools and rebuilding them twice.
So the short answer is it's just not happening.
Correct, and not just in Fairfield. I don't think any, and no New England town that I know of is going down that road. Occasionally, when towns do streetscape projects,
Yeah.
they try to incorporate burying them through there. And even doing 1,000 foot of streetscape project,
Yeah.
you're going to spend much more on the utility than you are going to spend on the streetscape.
Right. What about sewer and the extension of sewer to, you know, various areas around town? Okay. So now I'm jumping the gun.
Yeah.
So let me let Bill finish and we can get this. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. Good segue. All right.
Okay. So that's our existing sanitary sewer service area. And once again, this doesn't show up great either. But the where you see the roads close together and the dots close together, that's where the more congested part of town is, and that's where we have our town sanitary sewer. So largely the Greenfield Hill section is unsewer, all on private septic systems. Okay, and just some facts and figures about our sewer system. So we have 220 miles of gravity sewer. There are 8 pump stations. Like I said, it's gravity. Doesn't always work by gravity. You have to lift it occasionally. So all that 220 miles of pipe, everything flows to our wastewater treatment facility, water control facility, which is on Richard White Way, and that's rated for 9 million gallons per day. So that's an average rating. On a dry day, it could be somewhere around 5 or 6. On a wet day, it could be 25 million gallons per day. So the sewers in Fairfield they started building them in the late 40s. The original plant was built in the 50s. There were several expansions. Nitrogen's a element that we just started addressing in the late 90s, so there's been some, especially because we're on Long Island Sound. Nitrogen in Long Island Sound is the enemy. So that was another thing that we treated for. And just, you know, so our sewer system is viable, is important for community health and safety, economic development, environmental benefits, and just the total worth of between the collection system and the plant is in excess of 500 million. And that's probably 300 million on the collection system part and 200 million on the treatment plant, right? But once again, that's just round numbers.
Question.
That is a replacement. That's Aquarion. That's a replacement of the Aquarion water line.
And gas.
Okay, they're doing gas there. Okay.
Yeah, and gas.
So,
So
okay.
that is an example of one of the things I was talking about before and that Joe was talking about as in the beach area where it's an incredible, extensive upgrade of the gas lines from traditional to high pressure and replacing the water lines as well, right? While they're at the same time.
Correct, but they're not. Each utility has their own goals, so they're.
Yeah, I guess I'm making more of a too broad. My statement is just too broad, but essentially that in different places, those are the kinds of things that are happening.
Yeah. Okay. So what the Water Pollution Control Authority has done the last several years is conduct a facilities plan. So a facilities plan is analogous to your POCD. Wastewater treatment plants and sewer systems generally do it at 20-year intervals, 20 to 25-year intervals. And it's a long-term plan. It's a roadmap of what direction we're going to go. So one of the things so it's designed in the year 2025. One of the things you have to do is define the sanitary sewer service area. So you see the sewer area shows up better here in sort of an olive color. That's the areas that were sewered currently. The purplish is the area that we're not sewered. I got to know not to hit that handle there. So you see a couple areas. So generally, by and large, a lot with 1 acre or more could generally support a code-compliant septic system. So there are whole towns in Connecticut at over 20,000 people, Monroe, Guilford, Madison, not one sewer anywhere in the town. All the lots are large enough where they could support code-compliant systems. There's no public health or environmental issues when you could do it along those sides. So in that map there, the only areas that we're considering extending sanitary sewer into it, there's the area around the Country Club of Fairfield because of the even though those are large lots, because of the proximity and the soils to Long Island Sound, there's a nitrogen concern. Southport, west of the Pequot Library, is unsewered because that's right on the sound. The concern is with nitrogen going to Long Island Sound. And there's some areas along the Mill River and the lakes which we may also extend into. But by and large, there's no expansion into the purple area planned.
What about areas that are, I'll call, landlocked or trapped within that olive that don't currently get sewer? Like my street, Old Oaks Road, does not have sewer or gas.
Same.
And we're surrounded by lines on either side, but nothing goes onto our street. So
if your street starts having septic failures or rebuilds, that would be a time where we would look to extend into that area. We wouldn't typically look if there's not a public health issue or if there's not an environmental issue.
it's not until there's a problem. But what, like if mine fails, that's not going to trigger you ripping up the whole street and putting it in. So the homeowners are going to start to do repairs to solve the problem before you get to solving the problem as it's in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and one of the things we do is monitor, the push pins wherever there are septic failures or septic repairs.
Because
Yeah, but
anytime somebody's got to do a repair that needs to be cleared through the department, and so you keep an eye on where those failures are happening and the repairs that are working.
I know, but I mean, like, this comes up in my neighborhood all the time. People, how come we don't have gas? How come we don't have sewer? And so, it's the way it was done years ago, and you can do it. I back up to Melville, and apparently I've been told there's a line that comes up near me, doesn't go all the way to me, and I can tap into it at my expense of 20 grand I've been quoted.
Now, what is your street again?
Old Oaks Road, there's like 35 houses up there that currently, it goes to the Brookline Country Club, but it doesn't come onto Old Oaks Road.
So another example, Mill Hill Road. There's sewer up Mill Hill Road up to Warner Hill, but it doesn't make a left turn down the hill to my house.
Yeah.
My septic needs to be looked at right now. I mean, I'm not making this about me, but
Right.
I mean, it's an excellent question.
I don't want to be the $20,000 pin that goes on your map that you say, hey, now we bring the sewer after I've already invested $20,000 fixing my septic system. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And once again, sewer construction is extremely expensive too.
Right.
So in Newtown, Connecticut, when they were extending sewers into areas 20 years ago, it was not uncommon for somebody to get a $40,000 assessment.
Yeah.
So there's it's
One person?
correct. And once again, because these projects are multi-million-dollar projects akin to building schools.
Yeah.
What are those white lines? I can't read them.
There you go.
Excuse me, Meg?
What are those white lines?
Oh, that's 95 in the
Yeah,
Merritt.
those are the highways.
Those are the two highways.
Yes. Yep. Okay. So you see the emblem on the left-right Pierce. That's the engineering firm that did our facilities plan for us. So I borrowed some of their slides. So the way methodically you go through this, you look at the town, what's your sanitary sewer area, where are your growth areas, projected developments, zoning changes. We work with plan and zoning on that. A lot of it is crystal ball, population growth, business growth, residential growth. Inflow and infiltration, you'll see a lot in our slides. So inflow, because it's a subterranean system, more than half of our flow into our sewer system doesn't come from houses or businesses. It's groundwater that enters our 220 miles of pipe and our thousands of manholes and in the creek there. So that's a constant battle, reducing I&I, and I'll get into that later. As I said, we have a mostly gravity system, but we have pump stations that lift it over high points. Okay. Most our sewers are sewer highways. We have a east trunk line which runs basically down Stratfield Road, cuts across where DeSanti Tire is, goes behind the BOE building, Cumberland Farms, through the metro station. So that's our major trunk line, our sewer highway, where 60% of our flow goes. There's one on the other side of town that does that. So think of a tree going to the plant. The largest lines are at the plant, and it branches out to serve the public. So once you have all those components, you look at the treatment plant itself, based on all the factors, everything that goes there. What do we need to do to our sewer plant? Okay. So this is one that is directly related to a lot of things that planning and zoning does. We get the applications also, just like you get the application. So any applicant that, if it's a new project or a rebuild of a project, any project that comes before us that increases the equivalent of 4 units or more has to go through the WPCA commission. So a couple things we do is have them do metering downstream, so we see what actual flow is immediately downstream in several locations. They have to estimate what their sanitary sewer flows are. For instance, so the dorms that you were talking about, Sacred Heart. So that project, they would have to estimate a flow. We'd verify it, crunch numbers, and based on how many equivalent units. So if they have a dorm, that's the equivalent of 100 units, which is like 100 lot subdivision. They pay us 100 units times that figure there, $3,185. And that's not an arbitrary number, so the same engineering firm, Wright Pierce, came up with that number. So that's what it costs us as an average to remove 1 unit from the system. So the theory is that we can make projects flow neutral, so we can approve, not that we get a lot of subdivisions, but if we got a 20-lot subdivision coming in, we could collect $62,000 from the developer, wisely spend that money to remove that amount of flow from our system and make it flow neutral.
And by remove that from the system, you mean to shore up leaks and manhole covers and other areas where we're getting additional.
Yeah, exactly. We do various construction projects to seal up these pipes. Like I said, a lot of these pipes are going back to 1948. Concrete pipes, joints every 4 feet. So it's a constant cycle. But one of the things we've seen with our flow, even the last 10 years, where we've seen some growth in Fairfield, the trend is for our flow to go down. So even with the
trend is what?
For our flow at our sewer plant to go down, and it's going down not just because we're getting more. We're not getting billed. It's going down because we're making a dent in our inflow and infiltration.
Yeah, I think as a general, would you agree that it's a general matter, the population is a little bit more environmentally conscious as well, right? So they're not using as much water through the sewer systems.
Yeah, and even the toilets and showers, the way they make them now,
you get
they're
energy efficient,
low
with more efficient appliances and everything. So
and so we do. So once again, we do have a mechanism in place for making it flow neutral. And if the pipe downstream can't handle the flow, the developer is responsible for that specific upgrade. Okay. So one of the things we did is, to estimate future flows, we worked with the planning and zoning staff, looked at residential, expansion into new areas, which I mentioned, growth in the existing areas, like Commissioner McAleese's example. Infilling the home. The universities have turned out to be a large expansion, as you know. Commercial industrial development, we looked at the larger tracts of land. you guys know where they are, so there's a certain percentage we apply to them. So not every one will be built up to the biggest and best use by 2045, but we made assumptions on, how much a 6-acre parcel could handle as far as development. What are we likely to see on parcels on Commerce Drive? The assisted living facilities is something that we've seen a proliferation of, so we incorporated some of those. And of course, the TOD areas, we used the information, we worked with Jim and Emmeline and your consultant on the TOD study, so we folded that right into our work. So the summary of flows here. So this is the average daily flow. So existing, it's 8.5 million gallons per day, and the estimated increase is 0.58 gallons per day. So whatever that is, approximately a little over 5%. So that's what the acknowledgement that even though in theory we make projects flow neutral, you're not going to get everything, so there is some allowance in there. So the flow for the plant over there with the future flow is 9.12 MGD, which is over our plant capacity now. The peak flow, like I said, we designed for the average, but you got to be able to handle the peak. So those are some numbers there. So just a summary of some of our findings. The I&I is over 50% of our flows, so we continue to address those through improvements.
50% of the volume of liquid that we treat in our sewer systems is infiltration?
Over 50%, correct.
What a waste of money.
And once again, no sanitary sewer system is, I&I is inherent in every sewer system.
But over 50%, I don't know, I'm just reacting, but is that usual?
For a system of our size and age, so the sort of the good news is that's slightly high, but that means that there are areas to capture it and reduce it.
Yeah.
And and our system, when they were planning our system in the late 40s and early 50s, one of the credit to the way they laid out the system is we have 220 miles of pipe, and we only have 8 pump stations. Where if you go to Milford, where they have 50.
Wow. 50 pump stations.
If you go to Branford, they probably have 48 or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the good news, that our system was laid out very well, that it's a gravity system. But sort of one of the bad things is that they made them follow rivers too closely. And I mentioned if you're standing in the BOE building and you look out into the marsh, there's a sewer line a couple hundred feet there.
Right.
You can't walk to the sewer, or else you'd be walking on water. So that's a bad place for a sewer. So that's the bad news, that we have over 50%. But the sort of the good news is there are opportunities to reduce that and make a dent in it. If we had
The glass is half full, literally.
but if we couldn't go after the I&I, we'd be building much more capacity. We'd be talking about a major expansion of our sewer plant.
Yeah.
I have a question. Does the infiltration dilute the sewage and help you have to treat it less?
It does somewhat, but it does dilute it. But you almost need, you can't have it too. The process, it can't be too diluted.
Because you have to treat it no matter what.
You have to treat it, and it's a lot of it is a biological process. So you want to have some of the rich stuff in there too. So. Yep, I think that just. I'll touch on, only a small expansion is planned at this time. But even with that small expansion, their sewer plant, we're still talking about a $60 million plus project. And when we say it's adaptable, one of the things we don't want to do is, we don't want to be carved in stone. So if we want to build it so that it could be expandable at some point. We don't want to spend money on infrastructure that the flow will never come, But conversely, we want to be somewhat flexible that if something does come up unexpected in the next 10 years and we're getting flow, we don't want to start from scratch. We want to be able to shift gears pretty fluidly.
What are sewer pipes today ideally made of? What you would install now?
Okay. Generally, they're made out of PVC pipe. Once you start getting very large, like something like over 30 inches, then you start making the decision: do I go with concrete? Do I go with concrete or do I go with PVC? Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is basically the strength of the pipe.
And we have a lot of clay. What are our old ones made out of? The older pipes, the sewer system started around the sewer plant, and it worked its way up. So the east trunk line where it goes up to, so basically the beach area, Tunxus Hill, Stratfield are the oldest sections of the sewer line.
What are those pipes made of?
Well, a lot of the older ones, the larger pipes are made out of concrete with joints every 4 feet. A lot of the smaller pipes, the 8-inch and the 10-inch, are made out of vitrified clay pipe, which isn't very strong.
Right.
If you had a pipe there, you could probably crush it with your heel.
Right. And you said the joints are every 4 feet?
The bigger concrete pipe, that's the way they used to build them.
And how did they join those sections? What was the binding agent?
There's a bell and spigot, and generally it's mortared in there. But once again, the mortar in there is now, from 1947, is now 72 years old.
Yeah. Been moving every winter.
Yeah.
Some of them were on piles, but there's settlement and stuff.
Yeah.
But we camera the lines, we look for the II. We don't make, you want to make cost-effective improvements to reduce flow. So you don't want to spend $100,000 to reduce, to get piddles. You want to go after the big items. Yep. That's just an overview of our sewer plant. So it's a fascinating process, involves biology, chemical, physical type treatment. So we take sewage, we treat it, we keep raking out impurities, and we're able to discharge clean water to Long Island Sound, so we're pretty proud of what we do. So the next step, so the facilities plan is completed. It was probably about a 3-year process. The first step we did in the process was do our flow projections. Based on the fact that we're 3 years out, we talked about our last meeting that we sort of want to see how we did with our crystal ball. So we're going to revise our flow projections, just make sure we're where we think we are with the development around town, things like that. So after that, we'll probably be ready to initiate a request for funding sometime this calendar year, which is on the order of $4 million, to begin the design. And depending on what the design comes up to, once again, we're talking about a construction project in excess of $60 million. But one of the things
this is to update the treatment plant.
That's just a treatment plant, and fortunately, the money that we collect from the I&I fees, especially with the large projects, has been in excess of $500,000 a year. So we're able to reinvest that into our system. So like the Scala properties, the current one was at least $150,000. The new ones are about $250,000. Same thing with the Sacred Heart ones, the assisted living. So we've been able to collect a good revenue stream to invest back into our system without affecting the ratepayers or the taxes.
Okay.
So when we go through the exercise with the TOD, there is a straw that breaks the camel's back, but we think the way the system is set up, we're pretty adjustable, and we can't handle any flow, but we should be able to take care of the growth needs of the town of Fairfield.
Very good. Does anyone else have any questions? Good. Now it's out. Is it the wire?
Yes.
I think that's where it connects in. He's gonna turn it back on. So then this last section is really just to talk about our stormwater infrastructure. So Bill's gonna do that part, and then that's gonna conclude everything.
Am I on? Here we go. All right, yeah, stormwater infrastructure, one of the things that the town has performed in the last year or so is we hired a consultant to take a look at some green infrastructure improvement possibilities. Malone and McBroom had done a study, you know, where they looked at green roofs, maybe rechargers, dry wells, potential rain gardens. As you know, the downtown or Fairfield Center areas has tight density, and a lot of it's already impervious. One of the areas that is not impervious, sorry about that, jumping the gun myself. The types of green infrastructure that we were talking about with the rain gardens and bioretention basins, they filter out the water, they look nice. Those are the ones that are usually above ground. They're like glorified detention ponds, but they're smaller and more attractive looking, but they handle a smaller area. The rechargers or dry wells or some of the underground detention systems. Here for Sunrise, we required them as part of the development for no net increase in runoff. So here's a picture of what they look like underground. It gets all buried. If these are heavy-duty units, you can pave over it and people can drive over it. A lot of the Walmarts and, you know, Stop and Shops of the world have them under the pavement. It also highlights the fact that the engineering department, conservation where it's applicable, and zoning look at all the proposals. And matter of fact, you even heard it here today with the Sacred Heart proposal that they're required to meet drainage requirements to reduce runoff, or at least a no net increase. And it does remind me that the town is looking at probably increasing the design storm later this fall because of the frequency of the storms that seem to be coming the last year or two. So, but you can't just make the private development do it. You have to lead by example, and so here's an example that we had done with Sherman Green. We were able to get steep grant money and perform the underground storage units. We put, I think there was 1,200 units, small, you know, these units here, under Sherman Green, and we did dry wells on Sanford Street, and it seems to make an improvement for that area. Obviously, if we get a major storm, though, being that the downtown area is probably 18 acres of impervious surface, you know, we need about 8 more of these to really make a dent. But every little bit helps, and so we're also trying to meet the DEP and EPA's guideline of trying to reduce impervious surface 1% to 2% per year, and so this is a good head start for the downtown area as well.
So this is taking stormwater from local roads?
Local and some of the state roads, yeah.
Yeah.
There's
okay.
a pipe that goes from Sanford Street, and it also goes from the library on the Post Road, forms a Y, goes underneath Sherman Green, and so we were able to hook up the pipe that goes from Sanford Street and a couple of catch basins on the Post Road by the bus shelter there, and on the corner. And then what we were trying to do is create a bypass, but the pipe was like 7 or 8 feet below grade, and so we would really have to put these way underground. And so what happens is if there's a surcharge before it pops out on the street, we have them go in here. Yeah. So, so far, I think some of the storms that we've had this year, it has worked. If we get another, 7-inch, rainfall, it's only going to make an improvement for the, smaller storms.
Sure.
But there was one time, I think, a couple of years ago where I think we had 7 or 8 events that flooded the road. And the goal with this type of project and other projects is maybe reduce it so it's less frequent, you know, maybe once or twice a year, and maybe even less than that if we're lucky, so.
Right.
And from a POCD perspective and what we're statutorily required to do, we have to look at the overall health of Long Island Sound. So the stormwater system is a big portion of kind of, you know, all the drains drain into Long Island Sound. So being able to have better on-site retention also for us in our POCD helps us show that we're working to reduce improve the quality of Long Island Sound, which I think is within the statute.
Yeah, basically you're kind of getting, you know, bonus bucks or whatever where it's water quality and trying to reduce some flooding, so. Speaking of which, as I said, we just talked about the Sanford Street, and Sherman Green is phase 1. If we can apply for a National Wildlife, a very competitive grant, Fish and Wildlife grant, to maybe do, you know, pluck it right out of that study for some of the improvements that we can list and go for grant money. The Rooster River, we're investigating the Rooster River detention areas. The consultant is almost about 99% done with their report that we'll probably release to the public in the fall, and have a couple of meetings with the public as well. The town had hired Maloney McBroom to look at 7 different detention areas in the Rooster River watershed. We're also going beyond our boundaries. As you know, nature and the water doesn't always know boundaries. And so we've been dealing with the City of Bridgeport Engineering Department, and they have Ox Brook, a detention area that they're trying to implement and construct, and that would be a benefit to the town as well. We're working with City of Bridgeport at the Fairchild Wheeler Golf Course for potential detention areas there. And we're even having discussions, monthly discussions with town of Trumbull. One of the things that we learned that when the rain happened in that September 25th, and mainly the September 25th storm, or 26th storm, was 7 inches fell on Trumbull, and the Trumbull Mall has no detention. So that water just came gushing down, and it overshot the banks of the Rooster River, causing a lot of damage in those areas. So we're constantly trying to get Trumbull to participate with tighter zoning, and certainly any new improvements or any improvements at the Trumbull Mall. And then another thing we're trying to do is maybe have a benefit with the Rooster River, where you have the city of Bridgeport, town of Fairfield, and town of Trumbull. Well, if we apply for a grant, now we can say this is going to benefit 3 municipalities, and so we're hoping that cooperation, and with maybe MetroCog, where we have an opportunity to do some of the grants. So that's one of the things that we're looking at, trying to, again, we're not going to eliminate the flooding. A lot of unfortunately, some of the streets and the neighborhoods are in a 100-year floodplain, and it's extremely hard to get them out of it. But again, if we can reduce a lot of that nuisance flooding, or maybe design detention ponds for 10 or 25 or even 50-year storms, then there's going to be at least a lot less frequency of flooding. And that's the other thing that we're trying to do, is reduce the flash flooding as well. Yeah, we replace bridges we talked about, and then we talked about the other grants that we're applying for. And then the goals and policies is, we didn't really talk about it here, but we could probably have a whole workshop on this alone. And I'm sure you've all heard about the coastal resiliency measures, and I know there's probably more workshops to come on that. Continue to improve the stormwater quality, the MS4 regulations. The EPA and Connecticut Deep have basically forced municipalities to address the stormwater quality issue, and we think it's a good thing as well. Obviously, the improvement to the water courses will result in, better wildlife, better fishing, cleaner water, and cleaning swimming conditions, you know, to maybe reduce the amount of closures that may occur after a big rainfall event. We're going to have to implement a stormwater ordinance and illicit discharge regulations. We're a little bit behind on that, and the goal is either this fall or early winter to pass some of these ordinances and regulations through the town boards. What has bought us some time is that zoning has, and some of the, whenever you go for a building permit, we follow through some of the MS4 requirements and stormwater pollution prevention plans for developments and things like that. So we at least can say that some of these are covered under conservation regulations, TPZ regulations, and engineering standards, you know, for permit sign-offs.
Because that is our state statute, a state requirement? that we
State
have,
and federal requirement now,
and that
yeah.
we implement MS4 requirements.
Right.
And so best practices is that we have a section of our local ordinances that speak directly to that with a litany of regulations. And instead, in the meantime, we are achieving compliance through a patchwork of
That's a good way to put it,
you know,
yes,
different
correct.
s-
And they put it all in
situations.
one package, so to speak, and the DEP, and there's a couple of agencies, NEMO, CLEAR, and they've helped, and they've actually have a model ordinance. You know, again, one doesn't fit, you know, one size doesn't always fit all, but we'll probably base these regulations and the ordinance on that model and kind of cater it to Fairfield, where maybe we're stricter in some areas that we want to be, and then on others, you know, no, that doesn't really apply, then we might not have to put it in. So, and then, of course, this one here we alluded to before. It's really, we're proud of trying to improve the access, safety, and efficiency in the transportation projects, so. And that's the end of my part, so thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
I'm sorry, I
No?
keep moving the mic. So just in summary for, I think, some of the things that we're looking for in terms of the infrastructure discussion. Obviously, you know, the POCD becomes a significant source for grant funding. So in looking forward 10 years, capturing some of the projects that I think are most important to the town in terms of infrastructure is crucial. Determining where those are, where in terms of our infrastructure, we're consistent with the state plan of conservation and development is also part of what's required in our review. So I think, you know, that we have to look to see that we're consistent with the goals and policies for our area based on where we are on the locational guide map. So a lot of that tends to be infrastructure based in terms of rural areas not wanting to be urban areas and vice versa, understanding that we are a community that has infrastructure and therefore, you know, we can have focused transit-oriented development consistent with the state and regional plans as well.
Right.
Did you have anything to add, Jim?
Just closing, but not
Okay.
for me.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. Any discussion? Is there anything we want to talk about here? Do we need to digest this? I think it'd be nice to circulate this PowerPoint to the commission, and you know, we can take up and digest it, all of this a little bit, and take up in a planning session.
I think we can certainly do that, and I just wanted to thank Emily for quarterbacking this presentation, and certainly thank Joe and Bill for their continued participation. As you can tell from this dialogue, you don't always see the behind the scenes going on, but for you know, Bill's shop in engineering is probably the agency that we deal with most closely and on a constant basis. You know, you're always seeing memos and so forth from Bill's staff and others, but I want to thank those two guys for spending the time to help us with this presentation, being here tonight, and a constant source of information and support for us. So I just wanted to say that.
Excellent. Thank you. Certainly spoke for all of us, and you know, we appreciate your efforts and your time as well. All right. Thank you.
It makes me more cognizant of using pervious pavements too.
Yeah, impervious and pervious, right? You know, the benefits, certainly, and the detention systems.
It's ongoing now, I should say that, wasn't mentioned, I know Bill talked about some of the downtown improvements, the Fairfield Main parking lot, station parking lot is being repaved, and there's a decent chunk of that that's being, gonna be redone with pervious, asphalt, so again, to try to capture some of that downtown,
There's
runoff.
pervious asphalt?
Pervious pavement, yes, pervious,
Oh,
pervious.
I know there's
pavement.
pavement.
Not the entirety of the lot, because it's way more expensive
Too
than regular pavement, but a decent chunk of the repave is gonna be pervious. That'll
Great.
capture some of that drainage.
And you're gonna
Yeah,
install the
that's
detention.
gonna improve water quality and hopefully reduce flooding and less severe storm events down the
And so underneath that are the detention systems, is that right?
There's different type. With the pervious pavement, you could have a system of under drains, or you could have the voids of the stone that you put underneath the ground.
Oh, yeah, so the whole, like, in the entire lot could be, you know, a foot of just gravel where the water just kind of sits and, right.
It typically varies anywhere from 1 to 3 feet, again, depending
Yeah.
on the amount of storage you're looking for. I think Fairfield University has one that's like 3 feet of stone.
Yeah.
So obviously that handles a lot more storage.
Depending what's underneath that, the native soil still has some permeability anyway. Once you get into the stone, you can get some percolation down.
Right, right. Yeah, good.
Yeah, thanks. It hasn't happened yet.
It's close, it's close.
It's
This weekend, I think, isn't it?
Fingers next.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Okay. Anything else?
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again. And with that, I'll close the meeting. Adjourn the meeting.